Welcome to the Pima Community College Governing Board study session. I call this meeting to order. And with that, I know all board members are present at this as of now. I would like to turn it over to our guest. We have been doing a study of our bylaws, a review of our bylaws, and we have outside counsel Mary Ellen Simonson here who has been mediating for us. And I will turn it over to you, Mary Ellen, to give us an overview of what we've done and what we need to do today as our last study session before the vote to adopt the revised bylaws. Thanks, Mary Ellen. I think you're muted.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Okay, sorry about that. Welcome everyone. Glad to be here. As I said in the preliminary portion of what you received last week, you recall that Ms. Garcia had given us the night before our last board meeting was scheduled. She had sent some lengthy proposed additional revisions to the bylaws. And everybody agreed, including Ms. Garcia, that we did not have enough time, obviously, to review those because we were dealing with the other issues the next day. So in the interim, I have gone over those proposed bylaws with Ms. Garcia, and I had some lengthy conversations with her and tried to very succinctly, but hopefully very accurately, capture what she had indicated were the purposes for the proposed bylaws revisions that she was hoping to have a discussion about. So today is the schedule for that discussion. And
Can hear you.
Pardon? Can you hear me, Ms. Garcia?
No, we can.
Yeah, you cut out for a second. Yeah, go. Oh. Can you repeat your last statement?
Yeah, I'm sorry. The last statement I made was I had some lengthy conversations with Ms. Garcia about each of her proposals, and then I thought it would be very helpful to give you, to the right of each of those proposals, my comments that hopefully capture, and I think they do, because Ms. Garcia and I spoke this morning, I think they do capture the purposes for which she is proposing these bylaw revisions. So I think we can go through them fairly quickly if each of you have had a chance to review those comments and the proposals. And then Ms. Garcia, of course, you're certainly free to add anything that I may have omitted in those comments that hopefully tried to capture what you had intended. So we can start with bylaw article 4, officers. And as you see, the purpose here is continuity and clarity. Ms. Garcia agreed to add this language here in the blue font, because if you recall in one of our, I'm sorry, Ms.
Mary Ellen, did you want to share the screen? Oh, I see it's coming. Sorry, I didn't know that was happening. Go ahead.
Okay, I think, Andrea, are you doing that?
Yes, I have it.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, all right. So as you can see here, in the conversation I had with Ms. Garcia, you recall, all of you on the board, that in a prior meeting, we had agreed to add the language in blue in terms of, if you're voting on one of the two leaders, the chair and the vice chair, it's always pretty important to have any nominee for either chair or vice chair must have demonstrated compliance with all board bylaws and policies, as well as a commitment to such continued compliance. I think there was general consensus among the board in the prior meeting that that was helpful language. It's probably, sort of almost to say, gee, you all agree that that's a pretty standard operational point for a board anyway, but it's always good to have it in writing. So that was agreeable to Ms. Garcia to add. Now, the other issue is, do you want to nominate and elect those officers for a term of 1 or 2 years? And that's still in play here. And Ms. Garcia, you may, I think that I've captured the reasons that you wanted to add that, but you may want to add something else.
No, I just think that it's, it's fair, and it gives each of us an opportunity to lead. I mean, we were elected officials, and therefore we all should have an equal opportunity. No one should dominate the board. And that's it.
Okay.
I still sort of don't agree with, and I'll accept it though, about the board policies, because it's kind of like putting criteria in there. Every single one of the board members has violated a policy, with the exception of maybe Meredith.
But only 2 have gotten a letter from the Attorney General
Well,
about it.
that's okay, because you guys always fix it.
Point of order,
Okay.
Point of order, Chairwoman Ripley. Ms. Garcia is impugning our reputations with baseless
Oh, my goodness.
accusations and no evidence. It is not productive for this conversation, and it's really inappropriate.
Yeah, I think we want to stick to just the language here. I think it'll go a lot quicker as opposed to going through maybe some historical issues and disagreements. So, all right. So this language, give Katie and I some feedback as to whether you want to include this option of 1 year in terms of the overall total revisions that we're going to present to you in about a week or so for an option to vote on.
I think it might be useful, I know we did this at a previous meeting, to review why we changed it from 1 to 2 years in the first place. And part of that was because the complexity of getting the college back in compliance, and also the complexity of all the initiatives that Chancellor Lambert is trying to put forward. And help me, Damon, in terms of my memory. We thought that the chair should continue for 2 years, because just for continuity of effort and continuity of the board and what we're trying to achieve. Is that how you would call that, Damien or Jeff?
Ms. Ripley, Dr. Hay, yes, I mean, that was the rationale at the time. It really made a lot of sense, and it provided that continuity both with the former chair, and I served in the role during COVID, and it provided that continuity. I strongly support the 2-year option.
I think Jeff's hand is up, Cap.
Yes, go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. So the other, besides the circumstances that Meredith and Damien have mentioned, another factor that led to the change was just the feeling that it usually takes a new chair at least a few months or more to really get up to speed. And so that from that standpoint, there might be a benefit to the 2-year term. So it gave someone a longer opportunity to really kind of get up to speed and then be more effective as a chair, just because of the learning curve. So that was just another reason at the time. And you can decide whether you still think that's an appropriate reason or not.
Thank you. And Board Member Gonzalez has his hand up.
Yes. As Board Member Garcia mentioned a while ago, I think I do support the 1 year, and more important is, as we said before, it's an opportunity to lead, but more important, it's comes back to the rotation. I think I agree partially with a 2-year, but I support more the 1 year at this point, and I will support the 1 year because we all need to have that rotation, and that's part of the policy that states there as well too. Thank you.
Okay, Board Member Garcia, your hand is still up. Did you have another?
Well, I will continue to support the 1 year. And I understand that, allowing somebody to serve more than 2 years is probably a good opportunity. And I know there's a learning curve, but at the time that we're voting, at that point in time, we can decide if we want to continue with that leadership. And it doesn't mean that you can't be elected again. By no means does it say that. Now, the other thing is that what I have, in my opinion, this board has been monopolized for a long time. That's my opinion, for the amount of time that Damon has served as vice chair and as chairman. So I would like to see, I only have another 2 years to go. So it may not even affect me later on. But the thing is that it needs to be fair to everybody. It needs to be a real commitment to work together. We continue with this kind of stuff. That's no commitment. That's not trying to work together. That's my view.
Thank you. And Board Member Klinko, you have your hand up.
Perhaps, thank you, Chair Ripley. Perhaps, Mary Ellen, it would be just even easier to just remove this language about the rotation and just simply have it be an election of the officers on a every 2 year basis.
Now, I'm not sure I understood. Remove what language?
The language about the rotation through offices based on their original swearing in date, just simply remove that altogether. And it removes the lack of clarity. There seems to be a lot of confusion about sort of general democratic process. Ultimately, people are elected to this board, and from the board, executive leadership, president and vice president are elected. This idea of rotation, that may have made sense at some past time and some other iteration of these board bylaws. But today we're talking about a $200 million annual budget. We're talking about extraordinary complexity. The idea of just putting in arbitrary language like this, I don't think it's really useful. I would actually support and advocate for the deletion of that language, and just simply have it be that the board is electing the officers.
Yeah, I mean, so the sentence, just for everybody's benefit, that is currently in the bylaws that says board members shall rotate through these offices based on their original swearing in date, you are advocating be removed. Does anyone have any problem with that? Do we have some?
I do.
Oh, okay, Ms. Garcia.
I do. It's just, again, Vice Chair Klinko trying to dominate.
Chancellor
Well,
Lambert has his hand up too.
Yeah, I didn't know. Are you finished?
I also have my hand up, but
Point of order, Board Member Garcia, are you finished speaking?
Yes.
Okay, the next person that I saw with a hand up is Chancellor Lambert.
Thank you, Chair Ripley. I just want to reiterate a point that Board Member Klinko stated. I mean, our world of higher education is becoming more and more complex. And I think governance has to reflect the ability to help support addressing and moving the institution along in that context of complexity. And the complexity is going to be, for example, the transition because of advances in technology are going to be highly disruptive to all of our organizations. The shifts in demographics are going to continue to wreak havoc on our organizations. And just the changing nature and sentiment of the learners. More and more learners, especially adult learners, are demanding shorter term, non-degree programs. All of this is requiring that, especially I think a chair, have a better in-depth knowledge and understanding of these trends that are happening, and therefore be in a better position to govern and lead the board in support of the mission of the institution.
Thank you. And Board Member Gonzalez.
yes, I disagree with reference to removing the rotation component there. And it comes back to what was said earlier in reference to being fair, an opportunity to lead, but it's already in there. It should be revolving within the board members. And it should be taking turns in reference to leadership. How is it that the practice is not being demonstrated right now? I think it should.
Thank you.
But providing opportunity for it's not only for immediately for us, it's for the future people as well too. I think it's only fair. It's only fair, and I disagree with taking it out, and it's a mistake to take it out. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to make one comment as far as, I think there is a disagreement that perhaps might not get resolved tonight, but in the understanding and the concept and notion behind this, because to me, I don't see this as being fair or unfair. I see this as whoever's the chair should have the desire, the time commitment, and also the commitment to the current administration and support of the current administration. It's about the college. It's not about giving board members an opportunity to practice their leadership skills. We were elected supposedly as community leaders with leadership under our belts. So I don't see this as an opportunity to hone my leadership skills. I see this as a commitment and a duty and a responsibility and an accountability to the college as a whole. So with that, I think, Dr. Hay, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair Ripley. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, Mary Ellen, and I don't know if we're just doing one section at a time, but from my perspective, sometimes with bylaws, you want to keep them as simple as possible. You don't want to over restrict your language. Right. And so I would suggest even section 4 in terms of limitations is not necessary, since it's a simple election anyway. And the practice has been what the practice is, but I don't know if we need to be so restrictive in our language in terms of a bylaw to put those limitations that are stated in section 4. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we can also discuss that. So it sounds like we'll leave in the language that Mr. Klinko suggested removing. Board members shall rotate that language, or are there others who want to have that as an option when you're voting on June 8th?
I think it should be an option. Sorry.
Board member Klinko, did you take your hand down? Go ahead. Sorry, board member Hay, Dr. Hay, did you?
I support member Klinko's recommendation just to simplify it and not put the rotation language in there.
Okay, so we'll have that as an option, because on the June 8th document that you will get, there are some revisions that there has been pretty good consensus on, and we'll be able to have that in one version of what's sent to you. And then the ones that have some options like this, we will put the options in so that you can vote on them pretty quickly. Here's option 1, here's option 2, etc. So, okay, I think we understand that. Katie, you've got that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. All right, and so let's move on to section 4, which I think Ms. Hay has identified as at least something that she thinks should be eliminated. Ms. Garcia, do you want to say anything further about that one?
The new one or the old one?
The section 4.
We just went through.
The section 4 new one in Article 4.
Well, I can't pull it up right now. I'm trying to.
Should be on the screen.
My system.
This is the one, I can read it for you. It's the one that you added that has term limitations.
Okay. You know, for me, you know, I know that perhaps we may have misstated that it's about fairness. It's really not about fairness, because we all represent the community. And I think it's misleading for Mr. Klinko to say that, to insinuate that, and maybe not intentionally, that that we don't stay current with what's going on in our economy and with our communities. I think that we wouldn't be on the board if it was.
Point of order, Ms. Garcia, Chair Ripley, Ms. Garcia is impugning,
Oh my goodness. Is this the way we're gonna work, Damien?
Yeah, this is, Ms. Garcia, you continue to make accusations that are unsubstantiated.
It's not an
You
accusation.
impugn
It's
the
a-
motive, you impugn the motives of any recommendation I make. Your statements are not based on policy, they're based on an opinion about what's driving the motivation. And it's not professional and it's really not acceptable. So
Well, can I,
This point of order, can we please agree as a board that to be respectful of one another and not resort to insinuation and passive aggressive inferences? Please just state the case, what you would like to see everybody on the board here. I'm talking to everybody, what your opinions are of these changes as we go forward. And please refrain from inferring accusations against each other. That would be the professional thing to do. Thank you. Who is next? Sorry, Board Member Garcia, did you want to
Done.
continue? Finished? Okay. Next, anyone else? Sorry, I have to scroll through to see hand raises. All right, thank you. Go, yes, I turn it back to you. And one bit of housekeeping, can everybody sort of
Ripley, we can't hear you.
I was asking people to mute themselves and I muted myself. Just for ambient noise, when you're not speaking, I know it's hard to do. We've been through this for a couple of years, but myself included. If we could, board members and others, mute yourself when you're not speaking. There's some ambient noise. And also just out of courtesy to everyone, if it's not a burden, can we all turn on our videos just because it's good to see who's talking. Thank you. And Mary Ellen, please go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, and I just have a quick reminder of those, that one slide I had in a couple of our meetings, which is kind of here are the ground rules. I think Ms. Ripley has stated it well, but I think let's just really focus on today on the language that's being proposed as opposed to anybody's motive or anything else, and just express opinions about why you think the language is or is not appropriate, as opposed to any comments about individual motive or anything like that. I think this will go a lot more smoothly. And so I think we're done with Article 4. We will obviously present options and then there will be I think voting on June 8th with respect to them. Okay, so if we're going to bylaw 5, as I say here, after some thoughtful discussion with Ms. Garcia, she agreed to eliminate this proposed revision after consideration of those 2 points that I have in the comments. I don't think we need to go through those 2 points because it sounds like you're all very prepared and have read them. So unless anyone has any particular reason to talk about this one, I think Ms. Garcia has graciously agreed to just move forward with the others. Okay. All right. So I think we're ready to go to the next one. All right. So we've got bylaw 6, the meeting. I think Ms. Garcia did say, as I pointed out in the discussion, that she really wasn't trying to, the intention wasn't to omit the right of the chancellor to call a special meeting. And I did some simplification of this one, as I mentioned here. And I think it addresses Ms. Garcia's point about specifying the purpose of the special meeting, but there was some duplication here, so I streamlined it a bit. And I think this complies with the open meeting law and the posting requirements and so forth. And if we move, so does anyone have any comment with respect to section 3 there? Okay, so if we move on to section 6, which has the language that is in blue there, and the chair shall consult individually. Remember, the language in blue here is language that I inserted to help clarify for everyone, what did the board have a consensus on in prior meetings? And this language in blue was a consensus by the board to add. So that's there, so you have the full context. I hope there isn't going to be any more discussion about that, because that seemed to be a really solid consensus, obviously subject to your voting on June 8th. Okay. And so, Ms. Garcia, there's in red there in the middle of subsection A, you changed may to shall. Do you want to say anything about that other than what's in my comment there? You're on mute, Ms. Garcia. There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
No, I think that covers pretty much what I have to say. I mean, what I would like to see, because sometimes, you know, if we have an opinion or we think there's an issue, or that we should be able to discuss it. And sometimes I don't feel like we're really given an opportunity, because it's and not to say, and I'm really not implying anything bad. It's just that sometimes it's just the chancellor and the chair that decides on everything. And I think that, you know, in some cases, you know, we should all discuss it. I mean, everything's presented to us already pre-planned, and I get that we have to do that because you guys have more information. But we would also like to have that information and make a decision on those things that are being presented. So I would hope that people would agree to this.
I just want to clarify, because this is really important for everyone to understand, and perhaps it's just a misunderstanding on your part, Board Member Garcia, but by definition, when I came in, consent agenda is consent, meaning we all did know about those items, and we received the documents, and were able to and had the opportunity to discuss, to ask questions, and to adjust if necessary before voting and before the board meeting. So I just have a problem because it's already stated that it's consent. Does that make sense? It's not like it's an item that was thrown on by surprise the day of the board meeting. You know what I'm saying?
No, but the problem is that sometimes, you know, we don't understand all that information. So, you know, it's already been condensed. I mean,
but you have the chance, if it's on the agenda, you have the chance. We are begging board members to use that opportunity to get, if it's a finance question, then let's schedule a meeting with Dr. B.
It's only 3 days that we can actually do anything with it.
Well, it's 5 days actually, but
no,
I mean,
Saturday and Sunday is out of the question. We get it on a we come to a board meeting on Wednesday.
Mr. Sylvan, did you have a comment to add to that?
So maybe if we're talking about the may shall, maybe I can clarify a little bit. So board members, of course, get the draft packet 10 days before the board meeting. And it's always been the practice that if any board member at any time, including at the board meeting, asks for an item to be pulled from consent agenda, it is. I can't remember an instance when that hasn't happened. So if a board member sends an email before the meeting and says, I want item 6 moved from the consent agenda, that happens, or at the board meeting. And so to me, actually, this change reflects current practice and kind of pretty standard board practice, because consent agenda is supposed to be routine things where there's not really discussion. I mean, certainly it's a best practice and helps the staff if board members make that known as early as possible. But the change from may to shall is consistent, at least with how we've been doing it.
Okay, great points. Yeah, and you're right, it is 10 days. Dr. Hay, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of changing may to shall, just because I think from Jeff's, what he just stated, it is practice and it's almost always done, but it's still up to the decision of the board chair. And I don't want to take power away from the board chair So I think May covers it fine.
And Board Member Klinko, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Ripley. Yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement with Dr. Hay. I think the change, well, first of all, I mean, as of now, you know, again, as Mr. Sylvan stated, there's never been an example where we haven't pulled an item from the consent agenda. But I think by putting definitive language like shall, it could be abused. If I sent an email and said I'd like every single one of the 25 consent agenda items on the next agenda, you know, individually considered, you know, per the change, we would have to sit and do that and have to have a discussion and go through the vote of each and every single one. So you know, I'm not sure that you know, it could be used as an obstruction tool. I mean, there's been no problem that we're trying to fix, and so I'm not clear what exactly the intent of this change is trying to achieve. And you know, as was, you know, stated by the proposer, you know, this is supposed to help, I would assume, provide more clarity on the topics. But, you know, Chair Ripley, as you noted, it really is the responsibility of the individual board members to reach out prior to the meeting in the 10-day window and get those questions answered. And, you know, come with, I mean, and I think back to former board members like Board Member Hannah, who had many questions about many items, and on items that didn't get resolved before the meeting, those items were pulled from the consent agenda and they were discussed and voted on individually. And it was an effective practice, but it takes that responsibility of the individual board member to do the work, not show up to the meeting unprepared without, you know, having reviewed the information and expect by pulling it from the consent agenda to have a full presentation and have all of these new questions that could have been easily answered prior to the meeting.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I see every point. I think also with respect to this, perhaps the wording could be, you know, a little bit different as well, because this just states that the at the meeting. So that means the governing board meeting. So it would be at the meeting, in the middle of the meeting, a consent agenda would be pulled, which would be a surprise to everyone. And I think all of us agree that because we have a consent agenda and we have an agenda 10 days beforehand, that we don't want surprises. So I think maybe we need to think about having, and we don't need to do it in a bylaw. This is something I think that we can talk about civilly as a board, maybe agree that within that 10-day window, maybe 5 days, give the board and the board chair an opportunity to help you understand that that agenda item, and or pull it if you need more time and more training on that topic, as opposed to the day of and in the middle of the board meeting suddenly pull the agenda, because there might be people in other, you know, there's a lot of examples. There's dozens of examples. Somebody in, you know, in construction or in facilities that are waiting for that vote and thinking that, well, that vote's going to happen, it's on the consent agenda, then we can start working. But if it's a surprise and it's pulled that day, it could really end up in a trickle-down effect, if you know what I mean. So I don't know. I think there might be room for more discussion on this. Chancellor Lambert.
Yes, Chair Ripley. Just a reminder for all the board members: we like it when you come to us well in advance to share, you know, your thoughts, concerns. You need more information about any item on the agenda, and especially about any action item, whether it's consent or otherwise. One of the reasons why that's important is it allows us to be prepared to help you make an informed decision. Mm-hmm. And so if all of a sudden something is pulled last minute to go from consent to action, but I don't have the technical expert in attendance because we didn't know that there was an issue, then it makes the conversations more clunky, as well as, you know, not as efficient as it could have been. So I want us not to lose sight of that. Another thing is there are some items where we get to a point where we do need a decision by. And so when we haven't heard from a board member until the board meeting, and then, like, for example, tuition is a classic example, right? Kicking tuition over another month and worst case 2 months does have ripple effects. And so if I know about the concern early, we can address it. So I just ask the board to keep that in mind about any consent or action items.
Thank you, Chancellor. Any more discussion? If not, Mary Ellen?
Yeah, and I would also add, the language in blue right at the top there under subsection A, which there was great consensus on in a prior meeting, also does give the option here of the chair is going to be individually talking to board members before the board meeting as to whether the agenda includes everything that you want. And I assume the corollary would be that if there's something in the consent agenda, you'd mention that at the time as well. And so you'd be able to determine before the meeting whether there was some discussion necessary and whether there was a need to pull that. So I think you've got a lot of that covered. And Ms. Garcia also agreed to eliminate subsection B there for the reasons I mentioned in the comments. So I think we are, now, Ms. Garcia, do you still want the shall to be in as an option for the June 8th meeting, or are you persuaded by the discussion here that we don't need to have that?
I'll agree to remove it.
Okay, that's great. All right. Okay, so let's move on. Thank you very much. Let's move on to bylaw article 12, responses to complaints. So I did a fair amount here to just kind of make the format conform to what is already in the bylaws. And I think that Ms. Garcia wanted to have some additional discussion about what's in section 1 here. And what I did was I added in blue what, again, had already been discussed at prior meetings. Now, Ms. Garcia, are you okay with, do you need to, or does anyone need to have any further discussion about what was eliminated from Ms. Garcia's, what she agreed to eliminate, and then what's already going to be proposed from the consensus that we had in prior meetings, which is in blue? Anyone need to address anything here in items 1A through D?
I don't see any.
Okay. Oh, did anyone raise their hand? Oh, Mr. Klinko.
I just wonder whether we need to be more explicit. We've had a lot of issues around employee general complaints.
Mhm.
And, again and again, board members have become involved in those complaints instead of simply facilitating the administration of college policy and have become engaged. So maybe we just need to be more explicit about board members not participating in an investigation, in a review, in substantive conversation about internal college complaints, and instead refer them through the processes.
And are you saying that you wanted to propose some language here, Mr.
Yeah,
Klinko?
well, what I guess I'm saying is perhaps there's an opportunity to just tighten this up a little bit.
Okay.
And I think we would look to you to provide that language, but language that really makes it very explicitly clear that board members are not to engage in employee complaint process, that really we have systems set up, and just be very, very definitive about it, because it's a problem that occurs over and over and over again. And we seem to struggle as a board, not just this board, but past boards, in our relationship to complaints.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, subsection D says at no time is a board member to engage in investigating of such complaint or take any action that even could be perceived as obstructing or interfering with the administration's role and responsibility to address complaints, and took out that word employee because they could be a variety of complaints.
But I think part of it is the substantive conversation. Even entertaining, you get a phone call from an employee, and instead of directing them through the process, you actually engage in a dialogue that then creates I think, confusion and misperception about who is responsible and what the role of the board is in the complaint process.
You know, that's it. That's actually a very good point. So, you know, sometimes it's really helpful to say, if, just to put some language in, that's like a little mini script. If a board member were to receive a complaint, here is the response that should be given. And the response is, I cannot address your complaint. I'm just talking off the top of my head, but we can come up with the right language. I want, this complaint needs to go through the appropriate process and will be, and rather than, you know, discuss the complaint with you, I will refer this through the process. And we could come up with some language like that. That is, you know, a standard response that a board member should give. Does that work for you? I'm not coming up with the exact language off the top of my head, but that would be the idea and the concept.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know if it needs to be prescriptive in the bylaws to have a script, but I think, you know, the intent of,
Right.
again, this idea of engaging in substantive conversation, because that creates confusion for the complainant.
Okay.
And who is actually responsible and what's going to happen next.
Right. And no one board member should be doing that anyway. Yeah, got it. Okay, does everybody agree with that?
Yeah, we have some more hands up. First, the
sorry.
Chancellor and then Board Member Garcia. Chancellor?
Yes, thank you, Chair Ripley. I just want to clarify. So this is any complaint then. And if that's the case, I mean, there's a lot of complaints now we're going to bring to your attention that we don't normally bring to your attention. So I just want to clarify that. So, and then in what venue do I do that in? And then what is a complaint? Sometimes an individual may say, well, I have a concern about X. They believe they just filed a complaint. Well, that I don't take that to mean that's a complaint. So I just caution us, without some clarity, we could be going down a road that invites a lot of inefficiency, especially since now you've removed that this is in the context of Title VII or Age Discrimination Employment Act, etc. So I just need clarification.
Yeah.
Because I don't want for us to be in violation of your bylaws, but at the same time, I think you're opening the door for people to, they decide what a complaint is by simply saying, I got a concern.
I just wanted to mention complaint is defined in the bylaws in Section 2. And if you read the comment that I have there, I actually say what the current bylaws define complaint as. So if you're saying, Chancellor, that you need to have a different definition of complaint, the definition you have right now is quite good, but it's defined there in my second to last comment.
Right, but I'm saying that that's still too vague in some. So for example, accreditation requirement. What does that mean? Ethical standard, what does that mean? Or published college bylaw. I mean, those things, what do those things mean?
Yeah.
And that's why we do our internal, my point is, when someone brings something, we look into it to determine if it in fact is something we should refer to the complaint process. Because if it's not, if someone thinks something is a violation, say, of accreditation standard, you look at it and it's really not a violation of accreditation standard, then it's like, well, here are your options, employee. You want to know about that? That's what I'm trying to get at. Does the board want to know about that? Because implicit in this, it sounds like you want to know about that.
Mr. Sullivan, can you respond?
So I'm wondering if we need to tighten up the definition. So it's not just that there's been an allegation that there'd be a violation, but that what's alleged, if true, actually would be a violation of an applicable standard. Maybe we do need to tighten that language up a bit. When we were, and just as an example, so when we were talking about this, I don't know, I guess last week when Mary Ellen and I were corresponding, said, so what if someone complains that like a light is out or something? They could argue, well, you're not following accreditation standards because accreditation standards include like you have to maintain your facilities to be appropriate for the educational environment. But I presumably nobody on the board wants to know if a light bulb is out. So maybe we could tighten that up a bit. I suppose if the board has concerns about whether or not complaints are being triaged appropriately, maybe there's a way to do a consolidated report at some point in the year, but I wouldn't put that in the bylaws.
So I want to make something clear, if someone can clarify this. I was under the impression that this bylaw was referring more to when a board member receives a direct complaint from someone, not just a general complaint that there's a million complaints out there.
So
right?
if I might, so we've broken the world into three kinds of complaints. So all of this refers to complaints received by board members. And the three categories or buckets that we've created are one are kind of general complaints, which could be about anything. The second are complaints about the chancellor's conduct. And the third would be complaints about board member conduct. So that might be another way to think about it. Is that the right way to divide up categories of complaints?
Board Member Garcia.
In my, let me see, I'm not muted, am I?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I guess in part of the way I look at it is, no, I don't want to, we don't want to know about general complaints. Yes, we do want to know about complaints against the chancellor. And then and we do want to know about complaints against the board, but more specifically, when an employee has a complaint and, that has to do with their civil rights, their employment rights, those I do want to know. And I think we should all be concerned about that. So I don't know if you create another bucket, I mean, I'm not an expert at this stuff, but I want to make sure that everybody is treated fairly and is given their due process.
Yes, we all do. Dr. Hay has her hand up.
Hi, I'm just trying to, Mary Ellen, follow what was in the original document and then what has been added or changed. So I'm looking at like item 1A was what in red, was that originally in the original document and that's now being cut?
No, the black is what's in the original document.
Right, but item A has a sentence, half of a sentence that's cut. I'm trying to understand the process here of what you guys went through in terms of what was before and what you're offering. The blue is the new and the red is cut from the old.
Yes, I mean, that was based on Mr. Klinko's suggestion at a prior meeting. And there was general board agreement that this be considered as a revision subject to the board vote, of course. And Mr. Klinko, do you remember what your point was in eliminating that could ultimately come before the board for a decision regarding the application of a college policy, et cetera?
I believe that we that per the change in our handbook, that process is no longer in alignment with how we actually manage the system, right, Mr. Sullivan?
Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, well, I'm following. Can you say that again?
Yeah, so I believe it's section A that we've deleted. That could ultimately come before the board on a decision.
Oh, yes. You're right.
That is no longer consistent with our handbook policy.
Yeah. Yes, you're right. Sorry, I got myself lost. Yes, that's correct. There was
Right, but, okay, sorry.
a time when certain matters could be appealed all the way to the board. We modified how the appeals work, which is why that language was taken out, so that it now aligns better with the handbook and board policies and the administrative procedures on complaints.
So the
Okay.
sentence there, Ms. Hay, would just say, avoid that the board and individual board members shall avoid pursuing questions into the details or the substance of a complaint, period.
Right, but doesn't, and I don't mean to get into the weeds here, but we are in the weeds, so well, let's just play in the weeds.
Okay.
So for the way that sentence reads now, it sounds like if a board member receives a complaint, we're not supposed to ask any questions, full stop. I'm just not sure that's what we're trying to state here.
I think what we're trying to state somehow is that the board members need to avoid becoming investigators. Because you can't avoid someone stopping you in the street and telling you a big complaint and giving you details. That's
Right, so
your, you know.
so that nuance, because a constituent reading this would think that the board doesn't want to know about the details of a complaint. So I don't know if you need this to add, I don't know why we would take that last part of that sentence out, because that suggests that the board will review. But you're saying it's not consistent with the other document. Do you know what I'm saying? It just sounds like
Yeah.
we're. Or do
Maybe.
we even
I
need
think-
that?
I think what
Do we need item A at all? Can we just eliminate
I was
item A and just go to B and C?
Well, I think what trumps item A is the fact, and I think item C, it looks like, should be item A, because your very first step when you receive a complaint is to say, thank you, I've received your complaint, and understand what it is. And then your first step is to notify Chancellor and Counsel.
Yes, I agree with that. I think that should be A. That's the first thing that should happen.
And that basically makes A, unnecessary, because it goes without saying, you don't act as an investigator.
And then B is good, and then D is good. Because D is, at no time should the board engage in investigations, which is what you're trying to suggest in item A,
Right,
I think.
right, because the whole purpose, back to our purpose, is oversight. We're
Right.
not boots on the ground action takers. We're oversight. Board Member Klinko, and then Board Member Garcia.
Yeah, so I mean, to Chancellor Lambert's point, perhaps in the final paragraph, the second to the last sentence, to the extent that any board member requests that the board receive additional information or periodic updates as to the process and progress as of addressing the complaint, I'm concerned the chancellor shall do so before any final resolution is made. I mean, in the past, I've certainly notified Chancellor Lambert of a complaint, and then he gets back to me 3 days later and is like, resolved. I can't imagine a delay of a month because we needed to have it go to the board for a special review. I mean, I would just recommend deleting that last section of the sentence.
Which sentence again? Can you repeat?
So it's second to the last sentence in the last paragraph. It says, to the extent that any board member requests that the board receive additional information or periodic updates as to the process and progress of addressing the complaint, the chancellor shall do so. And then that's where I would recommend we put a period, because it says before any final resolution is made.
Oh, right. So if it's a nominal issue and the chancellor's already dealt with it, why wait until the board meeting to address it? Yeah, that's a good point.
And I think that might address some of Chancellor Lambert's concerns that he outlined, sort of in terms of these becoming so hyper restrictive that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an important item. Board Member Garcia.
Yeah, I don't see it that way, that last sentence, that last document, because I know they don't do it anymore because of the way the handbook is written. But in the past, and I think, again, I'm specifically referring to employees, is that before a final decision was made on something was as as detrimental as firing somebody, okay, that it would come before the board for discussion so we would know and be aware of what the circumstances were. And I mean, I think that maybe certain things should come to us before a final decision, not everything. So I don't know how you guys feel about that, but that's how I feel.
Mr. Sullivan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so that's not, so let me clarify what in the past, if an employee was terminated, given notice that they're going to be terminated, then they could appeal that and have what looked like a hearing in front of the board. So they would go through the entire termination process. They would essentially be fired, but they could appeal it to the board. That's how it used to work. And that probably happened, oh gosh, maybe 3 times in the years I've worked for the college, including, and it was all before, in the 90s when I was at outside counsel. And so it's part of why it got changed, because what used to happen in the past looked like a mini public trial in front of the board.
Yeah, and so this is about complaints. It's not about hiring and firing. So it's perhaps because the hiring and firing is in another, falls under a different bylaw, which is delegation of authorities. Board Member Garcia, you still have your hand up?
Oh, no, I'm done.
Okay, all right. I turn it back then. If Dr. Hay, do you still have your hand up?
I actually meant concurrence of getting rid of that sentence regarding reporting to the what I can't see it now. Sorry for my screen. The one that Board Member Klinko referred to, because I think that this puts too much burden on the chancellor, and it's really redundant to what we're trying to achieve.
Right. So it states that the board member can request updates and periodic updates and information, which the chancellor, shall do and has done, period, pretty much. Because again, the final resolution could be made that day. And again, keep in mind, the chancellor is not the action officer running around resolving every complaint. There's a chain of command, and I'm sure it's like HR, ODR. And so I think that does save us from potential bylaws violations. Board Member Klinko, you have a hand up.
Just one final note. I mean, I think this other sort of issue about the chancellor shall confirm to the board the complaint has been received. I mean, again, it's the full board. I don't think that's in line with the practice. Again, there are certain items that are coming to the board at the executive session when complaints are, reach a certain level. Again, just for clarity's sake, and our current practice, if somebody sends a complaint, a student sends a complaint or a concern about something that's happened, whatever it is, often those get resolved and the full board isn't being notified because it's not rising to the level. So again, I'm not sure, if there's language that, and maybe Mary Ellen and Jeff, you guys could work on just tweaking that language to reflect the actual current practice. That's all.
Okay. Sure, we can do that. Okay, anybody else have any other points to be made on that section 1 under subsection 1 under section 3? No? Good. All right. So then moving on to subsection 2, in the case of a complaint about the conduct of the chancellor. I have some long comments there which express the discussion that Ms. Garcia and I had. And so I think that this captures her thoughts with respect to this. Now, I removed the college and faculty or staff. And then with respect to within 48 hours of receiving complaint, Let's talk about subsection A here for a minute in terms of what the board thinks of that particular addition proposed by Ms. Garcia. My point here is that may be too aggressive, but open for discussion.
Dr. Hay, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so within 48 hours, sometimes that's not even possible if somebody's out of the town or out of the country. So there needs to be a reasonableness within that time frame, and I'm not sure what that is. But I'm not sure 48 hours is the correct one.
You know, sometimes there's language in these kind of things that as soon as practicable or within a reasonable prompt period, something that doesn't have a specific deadline, but is very firm that it be reasonable and prompt.
I agree, because one of the worst case scenarios could be it went into your spam folder and it sat for a week and now you've violated a bylaw. I mean, that could happen. That has happened. Anyone else?
I think I have my hand up.
No, you don't, but go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. Anyway, let me go back. Oh, darn it. What was I gonna say? I'm lost again. I'm sorry. I got myself out.
Well, I can read it to you if you want.
Oh, wait. Go ahead.
Yeah, so subsection A says the recipient of the complaint, including individual board members, shall notify the board chair and college general counsel of the complaint, who shall notify all board members, and you had within 48 hours of receiving complaint. And what I'm suggesting is something a little bit more generic, but still firm within a reasonable and prompt period.
Well, you could say I think that if you were to put a minimum and a max length of time would be good. I mean, does everybody agree that maybe within 40 hours that would be good?
No.
No?
I think as professionals, we should all be able to agree that as soon as possible means as soon as possible. As soon as possible is not sitting on it for a month or 2 months. As soon as possible is as soon as physically possible.
Well, the issue that I have with that chairperson is that it has been my experience that sometimes complaints that have come in, that we don't hear about them for over a week. So that's what I was trying to shorten up.
Okay, Dr. Hay.
Yeah, the point isn't about the timing. I think as soon as possible makes perfect sense. And the chancellor and his staff or the general counsel needs to be able to talk to the board chair first, figure out if something needs to be decided or moved on, and then go from there. I mean, bylaws are not supposed to be prescribed down to the minute. They're supposed to be broad enough to engage the board and the chancellor properly and give some flexibility to how things are managed. So I don't agree with 48 hours or any time constraint. And I think as soon as possible is quite reasonable, as the chair has suggested.
Any other discussion? Board Member Garcia.
No, I should have my hand lower, right?
It's still up,
Oh,
but that's
no,
okay.
No, I'm down. Wait.
Okay, now you
Well,
are.
you know what? Right now it says my hand is raised on my screen.
I
Am
don't
I
see it.
raised?
There's no hand
No,
up now.
If you want to raise your hand, you raise your hand. If you want to lower your hand, you click lower your hand.
Okay, Mary Ellen, do you want to go?
Yeah. Okay. So I think we've got that. So let's go to subsection 2B. This is an addition from Ms. Garcia. When appropriate, the board shall engage external counsel to investigate any complaint as defined in section 2 against the chancellor. Now, my recommendation was with respect to that addition, to take out allegation, because I don't think we want that. It's too broad. and to define this more narrowly to any complaint as defined in Section 2 against the chancellor, which is more specific. To the extent that you want to have this addition, I would recommend making those changes. And I think Ms. Garcia did agree to that. So the question is, do you want to add subsection B with that recommended change?
Board Member Klinko, you have your hand up.
Thank you very much, Chair Ripley. I mean, again, I'm one of my big concerns about this is the idea that the board is now engaging external counsel as opposed to our general counsel engaging outside legal counsel. I just don't understand why the current process where our counsel is responsible for conducting an investigation, if we direct them to do that, is a problem. So this idea where we're sort of setting up sort of a third sort of an outside attorney to represent the board is something that's been brought up in the past, and the board has never supported that idea. And so I would recommend striking this.
Thank you, Dr. Hay.
Yeah, I don't mind Member Garcia's addition, but I would suggest I would add an amendment where appropriate the board in consultation with general counsel may engage. I would say change shall to may, and it needs to be in consultation or in collaboration with the college counsel.
Yeah, and I would also suggest, thank you, Dr. Hay. I agree with, it sounds like this is an absolute. I mean, I would either have this, it's already in our bylaws somewhere, I believe, that we as a board are able to, if needed, and upon request, hire outside counsel for any issue. So that's always been available to us at any time. I'm afraid that having item 2B here suggests ever so subtly that this is actually an official step that has to be taken. I see it says when appropriate, but I agree maybe changing it to if and when, or if necessary, the board may engage external counsel. But I also agree with the language that Board Klinko suggested as well. Mr. Sylvan has your hand up.
So I was kind of wondering whether it's already covered in D. I mean, I guess I'm just trying to figure out how to keep this simple. So in subsection D, we already have that if the alleged conduct would qualify as a violation under the definition of a complaint, the board shall determine in consultation with general counsel and when deemed appropriate outside legal counsel, the most appropriate means for conducting unbiased fact finding. So I'm kind of wondering, I'm not sure I understand what this adds that's not covered already in the existing language as proposed to be modified already in section D.
I see that. It looks like it's basically saying the same thing. Mary Ellen, can you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I do think subsection D does cover this pretty adequately. So I guess Ms. Garcia and I did speak about this. And so I think given the board's thoughts on this and given the language in subsection D, it does seem to me that that does cover the issues, because I don't think anyone's disputing that there ought to be the opportunity if, as Ms. Hay says, in consultation with the general counsel and the board, for the board to consider whether it needs to engage external counsel. And that will depend on the severity and the type of complaint that has been lodged. And so I do think subsection D does cover it. Ms. Garcia, would you agree with that?
No, and I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
Because the experience that I have seen on our board as a whole is that legal counsel is hired outside without the board's knowledge. And in many cases, it is the general counsel and it is the chairperson or maybe the vice chair that determines that. Not all of us are included, nor are we given an opportunity to state what the issue is, what the complaint was, what are we looking at, what's our opinion. We may be totally wrong, but we're not even given an opportunity. So I think we need to have that specifically for a complaint against the chancellor.
Yeah,
It covers it in D, but it has to be more explicit.
And what would
Okay.
you, what would you suggest, Ms. Garcia?
Well,
in
I like the way you have it in that one section. I mean, just leave it that way and it's done. It makes it clear for anybody else coming in.
Although I do say here that it does seem redundant. D could be, or B could be redundant with subsection D.
I understand.
Mhm.
Dr. Hay.
Yeah, I think subsection B is redundant with D, and I think we strike subsection B as in boy.
Yeah, I mean, the way I read it, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like D is saying the exact same thing, but more eloquently. I mean, it's much clearer that we have the opportunity as a board to hire outside counsel. We did that with Mary Ellen Simonson. The board agreed, we all together looked at different potential counsel, and we chose Mary Ellen. So I mean, it works. This system works. I don't know what B says that D doesn't say.
So can we just make sure we're not mixing apples and oranges here?
Yeah.
Mary, so this is just about when there's a complaint against the chancellor, right?
Right.
So time when the board would like another opinion, or sometimes it happens because I go to the board and say we should get another opinion or someone with different expertise. The board always has the authority to retain counsel on behalf of the college. In this case, we're just talking about when there's a complaint against the chancellor. And that's why I guess I'm back to, in the event there's a complaint against the chancellor, does the board feel that the process as outlined in the current section D is sufficient, or does enough members of the board think that we need that extra reinforcement that Ms. Garcia seems to be suggesting in B? But I'm just saying, the example of Mary Ellen is a different situation.
Right. Yeah, that
It's
wasn't
a different situation, but it's still the board coming together to decide on a council, not
The board always-
not delegating it to
Right.
our council to go find a council.
Right. The board always has the authority to go hire legal counsel on behalf of the college.
Okay. Sorry, Board Member Klinko.
I believe Board Member Garcia had her hand raised before me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at a million things. Sorry. Go ahead, Board Member Garcia.
Well, the issue again, I'll restate the issue again. The issue is that outside counsel was hired without the entire board's knowledge. One or two people made the decision. And so,
Are you talking about so I guess again, I'm trying to figure out, are we talking apples and oranges here? Are you talking about a specific situation involving against a complaint against the chancellor? Or are you talking
not against the chancellor, but I want to make sure because okay, so I'm going to be straight. Basically, Jeff, your paycheck comes from the chancellor. Okay, I understand you're the general counsel for.
Point of order, that's
But
his
can you
second
stop it?
knowledge.
Just let me finish. So for me, I think it's really hard. I would think so because we wouldn't want to put you in jeopardy. And I just don't think it's fair to you that you would have to deal with that.
So, okay, first, my paycheck does not come from the chancellor. It comes from the college. But more importantly, that's why this provision is in here. So if there were a complaint against the chancellor, we would have a conversation and talk about what's the best way to review it. And most of the time, if it's a significant allegation, we're going to be in agreement with each other that we should hire outside counsel to do that, because I probably am not the right person to do it. So we're not going to have a disagreement about that.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank
and-
you. Yeah, I mean, the way I read this is, we would, in item D, we would consult with general counsel for many reasons. You know, part of it is also a courtesy. He is our general counsel, but we also need his counsel. And second of all, the board is the one ultimately that would decide whether or not we do need outside. We're just consulting with general counsel. Board Member Klinko, you have your hand up.
Thank you, sir, very much, Chairwoman Ripley. So just to be really clear, I mean, I think there's also an issue about expeditious resolution, right? I mean, yes, we want to have a due process, but we want to do it quickly. I mean, it took us 3 months to hire Mary Ellen for this process because we all had input. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, we turn to our general counsel to help in make an informed decision on the best person. And it's really like, I mean, I'm not a legal scholar or expert on who is the right person to bring in to conduct a certain type of investigation into certain types of allegations. So, you know, I would hate if there was an alleged complaint that we wouldn't be able to even move to an investigation for 3 months because we were so busy having discussions and interviewing counsel, like with Mary Ellen, case in point. I mean, I think this was a unique circumstance, but seemed to me to be highly unusual in the way that we did the hiring. In an effort to placate and appease the entire board and have buy-in from everybody. So again, I am with Dr. Hayes' recommendation to delete B and maintain D.
So Ms. Garcia, we've had a pretty fulsome discussion here, and obviously you always want to eliminate redundancy in any document, but particularly in bylaws. So it does seem to me that D does cover the subsection B above. So based on everybody's comments, Ms. Garcia, would you be comfortable just eliminating B and just sticking with D there?
okay.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so I think we've reached some consensus here on the.
Mary Ellen, we do have one board member that has their hand up.
Oh, I'm
if you
sorry.
would. Yes, Board Member Gonzalez.
I just wanted to echo, if it fulfills the what is in B through D, I think should be okay. But as long as it fulfills it, that's all I care.
Yeah,
Thank you. Go ahead, Mary Ellen.
No, I think it does. And I do think that the addition of the blue language that Ms. Garcia and I talked about in D is also helpful. So I think it sounds like there's good consensus. That was a good discussion. Great. Okay, so I think the final point here then would be in subsection F. One of the things that I think Ms. Garcia and I did discuss is the language there of removing or its representatives. And in the comment here, I make the point that, sometimes it's good to have the flexibility to have a representative provide the notice of resolution. For example, I do so much employment law, sometimes it's better when there's a resolution of a situation to sometimes have the HR person be the representative of the board or someone else to give the notice to the complainant. There's all kinds of examples where that could be a lot more effective. And so I think on a case-by-case basis, the board retains still the right to do it themselves, but also retains the discretion to have a representative if the situation would be better attended to in that regard. So to me, that gives you a little more flexibility. Ms. Garcia, what do you think about that?
No, that's fine.
Okay. All right, good. Okay, so I think we unless there's anyone else who has anything else, because sometimes I'm not seeing every hand raised in my thing. So we'll move on to, yeah, so section 4 here, which Ms. Garcia had suggested adding. She and I had a pretty detailed discussion about this, and just to cut to the chase on the long comment there, I think we both agreed that you really actually don't have to expend any more taxpayer money to have a separate inspector general, because you already have an auditor general. And I know that Ms. Garcia, because of the board, because of the committee she sits on, is familiar with the auditor general, who makes periodic reports to that committee. And so I do think it's a cost savings, and it's not duplicative of having a separate inspector general when you have an auditor general who can do these very same functions. So I think, Ms. Garcia, we're in agreement to, you're in agreement to eliminate that section, correct?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so then moving on to Article 13, which Ms. Garcia, you added. This would be a whole new article. It initially didn't have a title, so I gave it this title, and I don't think, Ms. Garcia, you and I had talked about that, but you gave me sort of some flexibility after our discussion to kind of add a title, and we'll see if everybody agrees with this. So this, I eliminated some portions of this for the comments that I made here, because there are certain things that I think Ms. Garcia had picked up from some other university language that aren't quite applicable here, like the Accrediting Commission of Community and Junior Colleges. We're not a member there. So, so this is scaled back a little bit to actually not name the Higher Learning Commission, because at times there are different accrediting bodies, and you want this bylaw to be applicable for years, right? If you change the accrediting body, it's no reason to name the Higher Learning Commission, the HLC. So with those couple of explanations, open discussion. Ms. Garcia, well, first of all, are you satisfied, Ms. Garcia, with those changes? And then we need to hear from the rest of the board.
I'm fine with it.
Okay.
Yes, Dr. Hay.
Yeah, so I just want to understand. So we did not have this in the previous bylaws, the accreditation section?
You did not.
And why are we adding it?
Ms. Garcia, do you want to take that on? I think you wanted to just emphasize the importance of this.
Yes. I just wanted to make sure that we are following the accreditation policies.
And Ms. Hay, just to clarify, in the first comment I have there, the only reference that we have in the current bylaws, and it was added through consensus, I think, of the board in one of the prior meetings, is in the Code of Ethics, which is Article 10. And it just simply refers to the board that it shall participate in mandatory training on accreditation standards and the Higher Learning Commission criteria. And it may be, as I discussed earlier, it may be applicable there as here, that we take out the HLC and we just do what we're doing here, if you want to, which is to just say the accrediting body instead of HLC.
Yeah, I would go further, Mary Ellen. I don't think we need A, B, C, D, E, and F. I think we can just keep the first paragraph and keep it at that. I'm not sure the purpose of the rest of it.
Okay.
I also had a question on A through F, because it's basically delineating the chancellor's duties, and in the board bylaws, we do have oversight. I mean, it just seems like a lot of extra verbiage, which should go without saying that we have oversight and that accreditation is a priority to which we delegate to the chancellor. Board Member Klinko, you have a remark.
Thank you very much, Chair Ripley. Again, I understand, Mary Ellen, like the idea of removing the Higher Learning Commission, but I am a little concerned. The college has a whole panoply of different types of accreditations. Many of these accreditations are optional, and we pursue them. Like an example would be for our police department. We are in the process of pursuing accreditation for our college police department. We are not accredited. But this really would then tie us to always trying to achieve accreditation or achieving accreditation standards for a host of different things. We may, for whatever reason, choose that that's not appropriate. So I am just a little concerned because I think the intent of this is about our overarching accreditation standards, which the institution has had ongoing problems with, as you know, over the years. And we've had many visits from the Higher Learning Commission. So that's one point of clarification, and I don't know what the resolution or answer is.
Well, I mean, maybe you just put approved accrediting body as to your point. So you're not just, you could do that.
And then isn't the accrediting, isn't it also just implied in the accreditation standards, like the Higher Learning Commission, for example? They provide very explicit criteria of what the board is expected of the board. It goes beyond our bylaws. It's a standard of the institution, and whether we codify them in the bylaws or not, they're still required. So there is in some ways a redundancy because we're just restating something that's already a fact.
Sure. I guess my reaction to that would be accreditation is such an important aspect of the college that it would seem to me that having just a short reference to that in your bylaws is very useful as a value, but that's just my opinion. It's not a legal issue.
Then I would say I would just support the first paragraph.
Mr. Sylvan, you've had your hand up.
Thank you. So just a couple thoughts about how to approach this. So one is, and Mary Ellen may or may not agree with me, I generally think of bylaws is the set of procedures for the board to regulate its own conduct. Accreditation is really a regulation of the college in general. So the couple things I might suggest as alternatives is either keep this really simple, and then perhaps at a later session, what we ought to think about is a board policy on accreditation that would give directives to the college and the chancellor about what the board expects. The other possibility is, so either don't have any, you don't need an accreditation bylaw and have a board policy, or if you want to emphasize the importance, you have it a very short statement and then move a lot of this into a board policy, because a lot of this really is directed, I think the way this is done, at what's expected of the chancellor, which could either go into the board policy on what the delegation of authority and responsibilities are to the chancellor, or if you really want to emphasize the point, we could make it a separate board policy.
I'm in agreement with that.
Sorry, do you want to keep
What you said was
the short, a short statement with the detail in a board policy, or do you want to make the entire thing to a board policy?
No, that one. A short statement with a board policy.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was picking the right option.
Okay. Is there consensus generally on that aspect?
Yes.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. All right. Okay. All right. Let's move on here to our almost, well, we're getting close.
That's the last one.
Article 14.
Oh, wait a minute.
I'm sorry?
Nothing. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Article 14 is, it was, I guess, originally titled General Counsel, but here the purpose was to provide the board an opportunity to have independent counsel. We talked about this obviously earlier, And I think Ms. Ripley made the point, we really deal with this later if to the extent you wish to have this. I mean, this is, I think Ms. Garcia understands the board already has a general counsel, and we discussed that the board already has the right to select independent counsel. And I'm a good example of that with the board. So with the understanding that Ms. Garcia wished to have this clarified, this is an edited version of this that simply says the majority of the board may vote to appoint an independent legal counsel when the board determines it is necessary to do so. That's A. And then B would be the board shall conduct an annual review of the performance of the general counsel. So let's take A first. And does anyone have any disagreement with A?
I just have a question. Does the word appoint carry a lot of weight? I mean, should that actually say retain?
Could retain would be fine.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Hay, you had your hand up, sorry.
Yeah, I think this new Article 14 is redundant and not necessary. And it's not our, we don't do annual reviews of any employee except our one employee, which is a chancellor. So we do not do employee reviews. So I think the whole article needs to be scrapped.
Yeah, so A and B are completely different. A gives the board the authority to retain outside counsel if and when necessary for whatever reason. B is a completely different topic. It's the fact that we shall conduct an annual review of the performance of the general counsel. So is this too confusing?
Well, no, for me, we already have the item A, we already have that authority. We don't need to put it in bylaws, and item B is not appropriate at all. So I think the whole article needs to be scrapped.
Well, wasn't this already in our bylaws?
No, it's a new article.
Oh, it's a brand new article. Well, yeah, I'm looking at it right now, sorry.
Yeah,
okay, so it just went without saying that we can retain our own counsel at any time. Board Member Klinko, you have a remark.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that I'm in agreement with Dr. Hay's position. I think this article should be stricken.
Board Member Garcia.
Well, I think that we need it because, well, somehow, and maybe it's not through this process, but I think that we should evaluate how the general counsel is representing us. I think that's important.
Any other comments or questions or remarks?
Yep.
Mary Ellen?
No, I think that Ms. Garcia, do you want to make any changes here? I mean, we've already discussed earlier that the board does, of course, always have the right to retain independent counsel. So do you still believe that you want the board to vote on in June on subsection A?
Yes.
Okay, and it sounds like you also would like to retain subsection B for a vote.
Mainly B. If we could put B somewhere else. And as Dr. Haight said that that it's not appropriate, then I think that maybe perhaps we can readdress that, or maybe the chancellor can give us something on that.
Is the chancellor still with us here? No, I don't see.
Board Member Gonzalez has his hand up.
I agree with the B. I think it should be removed. It shouldn't be there. Just remove it.
Okay, is that a general, are you fine with that, Ms. Garcia, if we just remove this particular article and maybe rethink to some extent for some other time period or some other purpose, subsection B?
I'll agree with that.
Okay, all right.
Good.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Okay, then moving on to the next section. Proposal is section 15, Article 15. So we're at the next to last one here. This does seem like my recommendation, bottom line, to Ms. Garcia was to defer this proposed revised bylaw in favor of the above approach, which basically is, you know, the whole law in Arizona and federally is on whistleblower issues is extremely complex. And so I gave you an example in that link of what Maricopa Community College does. They have a very lengthy whistleblower protection policy. And so this really is not, in my view, an appropriate bylaw, to the extent that when you get to your policy revisions or any revisions in your policy, you may want to have a more substantive approach in your policies, but I don't think this legal issue belongs in your bylaw, and it certainly is so complex that I think doing something too simplistic is kind of dangerous, because you have a very specific statute in Arizona that is has very complicated ramifications. So I would recommend, and I don't know, after some thought, Ms. Garcia, if you agree with just deferring this to another time.
I'll agree to that because, as you said, it is rather complicated, and yeah,
Okay,
we want to do the right thing.
great. Anybody have any disagreement with that?
No.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, did I interrupt someone?
No.
Oh, okay. Oh, thanks, Mr. Gonzalez. Okay, so then we get to the very last one, Article 16, Vice Chancellors. So I have quite a bit of discussion there that Ms. Garcia and I had. And so I think that the bottom line here to me is, because you have a very clear policy in BP 1.05, the delegation of authority to the chancellor, which very broadly states there what the authority is that the board has delegated to the chancellor. In broadly speaking, it is the day-to-day operations and decision-making of the operation of the college. This would seem to me to fall into that. And so you certainly wouldn't want this, meaning the decision by the chancellor on an operational basis, if he or she is not able to be present, who should take over the responsibility in the chancellor's absence. That seems to me to be a discretionary operational decision by the chancellor and is very consistent with your current bylaws. So I would say that this is one where you would most likely want to really rethink subsection A. And Ms. Garcia, I don't know, after some consideration, I know at the end of our discussions, you were going to think about a number of things. Are you comfortable with that, with eliminating subsection A?
I'm not. I still, you know, the hierarchy of the college is the chancellor, the provost, and then it would be Dave Doré. Okay. The fact that we got a chief of staff, you know, I mean, really the provost is the one that understands and is aware of the faculty and all their staff and what's happening more directly. I think it's disrespectful, or, you know, I mean, if the provost couldn't attend a meeting or something like that, you know, she should be able to, because isn't the provost supposed to be the person that if anything happened to the chancellor, she would be the next in line, or he, to lead the college? Isn't it to mentor them? So why would you put somebody else in to take responsibility for the chancellor when he's not here? Only if and when that person is not available. Or maybe if that person didn't have the expertise in that area, then I would agree with that he could appoint somebody else. But it should always go to the provost. So I'll leave it open for you guys to give your opinion.
Yeah, this is, thank you. This is an interesting proposal because I again, I go back to this fairness and just. I don't think it's a matter of fairness or justness. It's a matter of who's the right person in the absence of the chancellor for whatever reason to step up for anywhere between a day and weeks perhaps. But technically speaking, the provost is the head of the academic mission of the school, whereas, for instance, you mentioned the president of campuses is basically in charge of just that, the people and the campus, the facilities, the maintenance, and basically the overall day-to-day doors open, lights on, functioning of the school. So it's really a matter of who is best situated overall to have oversight and responsibility and accountability and authority for taking over these jobs. It's a big job, but that's all I wanted to say about that. I would like to open it up to, it looks like, I'm not sure who went first, Dr. Hay or Board Member Klinko. Dr. Hay?
I'll take a stab at this. First, I need clarification. Mary Ellen, is this a new article or an existing article?
Yes, yes, everything in red is a new one.
Okay, I suggest we strike it entirely. I don't think it's necessary or required, especially at Pima College when we have it pretty explicit in the policy handbook about delegation of authority upon the chancellor's absence. So I don't think it's necessary at all. It is not, Ms. Garcia, the same as full four-year universities where the executive vice president has duties as assigned in the chancellor's absence, but that's clear that's explicit to each institution. And here, the chief academic officer is not the appropriate necessarily person to take on the duties unless the chancellor deems it so. So I think this is not necessary. I suggest we strike the whole article.
Board Member Klinko, have your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, again, I think, tinkering with the authority of the chancellor to try to make decisions when he is gone and in his absence. So it is, tying the hands of the administration and leadership is not appropriate. I would agree that striking the article is the way to go in this particular case.
Thank you. And Chancellor Lambert. You're muted.
Okay, there you go. Just wanted to clarify for everybody. First of all, our current approach to this has not been a problem. So what I usually do is I rotate with the provost, the president of campuses, and our executive vice chancellor for finance and administration. So sometimes one or more of them are not available. So I go to the other person. Again, it's not been an issue internally because when I know I'm going to be gone, one of them is tapped to be in that kind of acting role, if you will. And you saw that happen last week where I had, Dr. David Doré step in my shoes to do the board meeting. In the past, I've also had the provost do that, if memory serves me correct. So again, unless there's a problem you think you're trying to solve, I don't know that there's a problem to be solved here.
I will meet with you separately and talk about this.
I'd be glad to do that.
Okay, I thought I saw another hand up, but it looks like it went down.
Okay. So Ms. Garcia, just sticking with subsection A here, are you content to, based on particularly what the chancellor just said, that he sometimes rotates this with the provost and so forth? Are you content to drop this now and just have a meeting with him to express whatever points you need to?
I don't want to drop it. but I will still meet with them to discuss it.
Okay. All right. And then moving to subsection B, just so we deal with that separately. Initially, you had added the language that included the word recommend. The chancellor shall recommend to the board prior to the appointment, et cetera. And for the reasons that are mentioned in the comment there, you and I discussed that the chancellor has the hiring authority, both pursuant to his contract and both pursuant to the board policies. And that's very standard in higher education for the president, the chancellor, to have that authority. So you said you would be comfortable with the word consult with the board prior to the appointment of vice chancellors. And so that's a very different thing than having authority or eliminating the chancellor's authority, just consultation, while the chancellor would still retain the hiring authority. He would just hear from the board. Do you want to say anything further about that, Ms. Garcia? Have I represented that?
You've done it very well. Thank you.
Okay. So any commentary on this one?
It doesn't look like it.
Okay. Oh, whoops.
Well, might I add here, again, consult, not sure what that exactly means in terms of timeline. So for example, if we're doing a competitive hiring process for a vice chancellor, and I have to say to the person that we want to offer the job to, oh, I got to go consult with the board first, and it takes me 2 or 3 weeks to talk to everybody, we may just lose the best candidate. And Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, we addressed this issue in prior years with the new system we put in place for, I guess in this case, myself, to inform the board of positions that we have filled, as well as positions that have vacated.
Right. So in the past, the board used to vote on all hires, which created a host of problems because the names of candidates were public before that was necessarily a good thing. And it created this delay factor. So that's why we changed to the current system where the board approves positions. So the chancellor, if he wants to create a new position, has to explain why, what the duties are, and how it fits into the budget. But once that happens, the board delegates authority to the chancellor to conduct the recruiting process and make the decision.
Thank you. Any other comments? I don't see any. There is one, board member Gonzalez.
And it's only a comment in reference to Article 16 here. I think, no, I agree that we need to maybe have further discussion on this. One of the comments that was made, I know that Mr. Lambert mentioned that they rotated the various chancellors. Maybe in the near future, you can give us what has been those rotations of the chancellors in reference here on their position to fulfill your position temporarily. As you mentioned, the last one was Dr. Duray. Thank you.
Yeah.
Chancellor?
It seems like we're mixing two different issues, right? A, I thought we agreed that in the case board member Garcia would meet with me to talk about A. B is a different matter altogether. And I just want to make sure I understand that these are two different things.
So Mr. Gonzalez, did you have any particular view on subsection B?
No, I think as it was mentioned, I think it's two different matters as well too, but I think Ms. Garcia should, will inquire, as she mentioned a while ago with you, Chancellor, reference to what can be for further discussion between you guys. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
And
so
yeah, go ahead. Oh, it looks like Board Member Garcia, are you trying to raise your hand?
Yes,
Okay.
just one more comment on B. I know that, the chancellor has talked about, trying to fill positions. But I think that, I would think that if we're being responsible, we would like to know who's being considered. If it was a matter, I mean, it wouldn't take more than a week or two, even if you were to just send us an email and we would keep it private. We wouldn't disclose who was being considered. So I think that could happen. I think you could work with us on that.
So I don't have a problem with that. In fact, the last time that I made movement, I sent all of you an email to that point that you just made. So once I have everything sorted out, then I will send you an email, all of you an email, that this is my plans. But I also just want to caution all of you. I go to meetings where a lot of my colleagues lament having a hard time finding people, as well as having a hard time keeping people. We have been very fortunate at Pima. We don't have a lot of movement, and we seem to have been, I don't want to say immune, but we've kind of navigated this a little better than a lot of other places. I just want us to just realize that things move quickly. There's a lot of vacancies out there. When we have talented individuals, I want to keep those talented individuals here at the college and not have them go somewhere else. And it's shame on us if we do not act quickly enough, and then we lose talent because of a process versus having a good outcome.
Dr. Hay, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I would just say any such conversations between the chancellor and the board regarding hiring of senior executive officers would be happening in executive session anyway, would not be sent out by email, and would be under absolute confidentiality via executive session. So I don't even know this article needs to be stricken, as I have previously said.
Thank you. Board Member Garcia, you still have your hand up?
I'm down.
Okay, I don't see any other comments. Mary Ellen?
Well, just so we have the proper guidance here, I think I asked you, Ms. Garcia, whether you still wanted to pursue subsection A for a board vote in June, and I think you said yes, correct?
Correct.
And do you still want to pursue for a public vote subsection B?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so maybe you and I can work on, we can have a separate conversation about whether there's any way to restructure some of the language. Chancellor, on subsection B, it sounds like you already consult with the board in executive session before you
No.
Not always. But like I said, my last time, it's always under that cloak, right? That I sent an email to all the board members. Here's my planned changes as it relates to top level administrators. And I'm getting ready to do something similar probably in another few weeks, but I'm not there yet.
So just on B, just so we can kind of get the proper guidance here. Do you have any objection to consultation and including that within the bylaws?
My thing is, I will inform the board. I just don't want to be held up to making a decision till after consultation.
Okay.
I mean, obviously it's the board's decision, but just know the risk. If I have to wait till I consult, we could lose candidates. And if, it's hard out there more than what people realize. We've, like I said, been very fortunate, but I can take you to some colleges where they still can't find HR people. They can't find IT people. They're having a hard time, even when they fill something, people are just not as experienced. And we've been fortunate so far.
Okay. All right, well, okay, that's helpful. Maybe I'll talk with Mr. Sylvan after this on this particular aspect, so that if it's going to go to a board vote in June, as Ms. Garcia intends, we might be able to come up with something that might be more appropriate. But I'll have a sideline conversation with Mr. Sylvan on that. Is that okay, Jeff?
Sure.
Okay, good. All right, I think we are at the end of our session here, and remarkably, it is 6 o'clock. I mean, so I want some credit here for the last 2 meetings.
Yes.
We finished on time.
Good job, Mary Ellen. Way to go.
Yeah, you get more credit
Thank
than
you,
you know.
Mary Ellen.
Yay.
Mary
No,
Ellen, I
so
just
much.
want to thank you for, for consulting with me and going through and having the patience. So thank you so much. You've done a
Yeah.
great job.
Oh,
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
well, thank you very much. And I'm really kidding about giving me credit. You're all wonderful. You actually zipped through these. I really appreciate it. I think the dialogue was very good. It's been a pleasure working with you, and we will, Katie and I will get you the totality of the proposed bylaws well in advance of the May 27th deadline, so that you have them in plenty of time to look at before the June meeting. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for joining in, tuning in, and most importantly, thank you, Mary Ellen, and the board for taking the time to do your homework, study, and get to this point where we can publish our bylaws by the June meeting. And with that, if there are no other comments, this study session is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.
Bye-bye.